all properly acquainted. Okay, so our final topic for tonight is teaching Magic the Gathering to encourage social and emotional learning. Okay, so before we start, allow me to introduce myself. Um, I've been judging since 2015. I also with the academe for more than 10 years before the pandemic. And currently, I'm with Fulcrum Esports, which I co-founded in 2019. It is my advocacy, both as an educator, with a passion for both tabletop games and electronic games to educate parents and children about the positive impact of gaming. And that's essentially what we are going to talk about tonight. Okay, so to start, how often do we see this? Children who are easily triggered, very impulsive on social media. Or this, players who throw tantrums when losing or stressed. Or maybe you've encountered players who doesn't want to socialize. They can be called ill-tempered losers, loners, or maybe they hold a grudge even if it's a petty one. During COVID, a lot of the children went through a traumatic experience. COVID lockdown is very traumatic. They're not able to meet with their friends, talk to friends in private, open up and vent out personal issues. According to studies, the rates of stress, psychological distress, and post traumatic stress disorder symptoms were 39%, 44%, and 18% up, respectively, during the pandemic period. Social and emotional learning is something that I think is very relevant right now. This is already taught and incorporated in school curriculum. But I'd like to emphasize how we can integrate social and emotional learning through our passion with Magic the Gathering. Okay, so let's first start by defining what is a social and emotional learning. So social and emotional learning is a set of social, emotional, and behavioral character skills that support success in school, the workplace, relationships, and community. Social and emotional learning complements academic learning. Whereas academic learning increases your IQ, social and emotional learning improves your EQ, your emotional quotient, or your emotional intelligence. There is an organization in America called Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So they call it CASEL. Now, CASEL defines SEL as the process. And I'm highlighting the word the process. So it's the process through which children and adults identify and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Now, last week we talked about empathy. Earlier today, we talked about different types of learning. So allow me to connect these to our previous topics. There are different benefits for SEL. Youth development approaches that include social and emotional learning lead to higher academic achievement and lower risky behaviors among the young people. SEL helps in youth. It helps the youth develop and improve college readiness, career success, positive relationships, and mental health. What we want to accomplish is really promote relationship through gameplay. We want to encourage career readiness through teaching social emotional skills via Magic the Gathering, of course. We want to break down social stereotypes through the neutral platform of gaming. So there's no gender, there's no race in Magic the Gathering. We want to develop also leadership qualities. So these are some of the benefits of social and emotional learning. I want to show you they call this the Cassell wheel. No? So this is the Cassell framework, how they see the five core competencies of SEL. So we start with self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. So we'll go through each of these core competencies and how it influences the children. So if you see the blue rings around the circle, so these are the circles of influences. So it starts with the classroom, of course, through the SEL curriculum integrated in their academic subjects or in their instructions. Um, Outside the classroom, the school also promote SEL through various extracurricular activities. But it's also very important to not forget that the home and community, us included, um, also contribute to the development of social and emotional learning for these children. Okay, so what is our approach? So I like to put this simply. We want to establish a gaming club or a local play group where you can teach, observe, and offer a safe space for students to play Magic the Gathering and be able to promote the five core competencies of social emotional learning in a school or community setting. So that's what we want to do. And I'll show you how. I'll explain first what these competencies are, and I'll show you how we can integrate and apply it to our communities. So let's go through the five core competencies of SEL. Now, as I go through each of the competencies, feel free to ask me questions, or if you have any comment, let me know before I move on to the next. So the very first one is self-awareness. So self-awareness is defined as the abilities to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. So this is identifying emotions, having a growth mindset, and integrating personal and social identities. So self-awareness is basically knowing your limits, knowing what your goals are, and really knowing oneself. So I'll give a few examples how we can explore this further by playing Magic the Gathering. Okay, so one example is this. A shy student who is self-aware may notice her fearful emotional response as she is about to join an EDH pod with three other players or strangers to her. From her perspective, the three other players are already friends as they are already talking and having fun. So she's approaching a group who already knows each other, but they don't know her. As she approached, her heart beat faster and her stomach clenched, making her thoughts race as she worries about how others would take her. To get out of it, she considers looking for other pods with more familiar faces. But in the end, she recognizes that this behavior is just a result of her own emotions and thoughts running amok. And she accepts that these reactions can occur when she experiences anxiety and finally proceeds to introduce herself to the new pod. So if you are self-aware, you're able to understand that there are certain things that would make you anxious and would help you overcome the anxiety. So if in a play group, somebody is about to join the play group, or if you're new to the place, if you are self-aware, you know your limit, but you also know your weaknesses, and it helps you overcome this. Another example, a player notices that he played two lands at the end of his turn, and his opponent did not notice that. However, before he passes his turn, he informed his opponent, apologizes to the mistake, and told the judge to resolve the illegal action. Now, this player has a self-awareness that he is not a cheat. He is an honest person. So he's very much aware of his own values. So knowing your own values um, helps you make the decision. You know, so if we emphasize in a particular play group that you have to know what your values are and you apply it, whether you're playing a casual game or you're doing something more serious, you always apply those values, and it starts with self-awareness. What are the exercises that you can do with students or children in your play group to develop self-awareness? So maybe during that deck building, you ask the players, what is your play style? What is your deck about? During conversation, know if they want to play competitively or they just want to have fun or play casually. Or if they lost a game, ask the player which card did they like from their opponent's deck. And then what do you think they can do to improve their own deck? So these are things that you ask the players so that they are more aware of what they are, what their play styles are, and how it affects others. So this is connected eventually to the other competencies. But if you are aware that you are a player who plays for fun and you join a competitive tournament and you lose, you know it's not a big deal for you to lose in a competitive as long as you have fun. That's self-awareness. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll move on to the next. Now, connected to self-awareness is self-management. So self-management is defined as the abilities to manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations and to achieve their goals and aspirations. So this is not about controlling emotions, but having the appropriate emotional reaction that matches the context of whatever's happening. So self-management skills would include sustaining healthy boundaries, for instance, or maintaining attention, practicing self-compassion, regulating and expressing one's emotion thoughtfully, using feedback constructively. So these are all self-management. Now, ultimately, self-awareness and self-management are closely linked. For example, being able to stop and calm down when one is very upset requires skills like recognizing and labeling the emotions and considering how might they be affecting one's behavior choices. So that's self-management, um, and that you apply to your own behavior choices, which is self-awareness. So let's give a few examples. It is very often that you are in a game, that when you aren't able to attack, block an attack, and you lose. You can't even do an action because you have an opponent that uses multiple stacks effect, so you can't untap. There's really you can't do. Now, instead of begrudging or being very upset that your opponent plays stacks, you understand it's just part of the game, and it challenges you to just adjust your own deck and to your playgroup's meta. So it's really understanding the context of how you should react to a particular scenario. So other exercises that you can do with students, talk about their goals, and you know as
It's
long as they know what their goals are, um, it's very easy to manage your expectations. You can also teach them some breathing exercises, when they get very stressed. So how do they manage stress? So one of the things that I am taught how to manage is the first lip breathing. So I like to play this video about first lip breathing. So it teaches you how to.
Pursed-lip breathing is one of the easiest ways to help control shortness of breath when you are active. It slows the pace of breathing, making each breath more effective. With your mouth closed, breathe in slowly through your nose. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth with your lips in a whistling or kissing position. Here's how to do it.
So you inhale, and then with a count of two, and then
Remember to
you
breathe out
breathe
twice as
very
long as you breathe
slowly
in,
with a
and
count of
repeat
four.
this 2 or 3 times as necessary.
Okay, so far, if there aren't any questions, I'll continue on to the rest of the slides. Okay, so Halim asks, is accepting the reality that you don't like to play with so many stacks and choose to move to other LGS count as self-management? Yeah. Um, you know, there are options. So there are preferences, right? So let me go back to the description. Okay. So if 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 you don't like your play group, right? Um, Number one is you have to understand um, what's my goal. Why did I join this play group in the first place? Is it because I like the company, or is it because I'm forced by my teacher to join, or is it because I wanted to learn something? I wanted to play with people. Um, there are we teach the students that sometimes we have to adapt to our surrounding. Now, that's one of the topic that I will cover later. But part of self-management is really how do you react? Um, what's the appropriate emotional reaction that you should do if you encounter something that's not really favorable to you, that's something you don't like. So if you don't like to play with so many stats, it's probably another option to talk to other players, or maybe they have other decks that they can use. Also, if they're playing stacks and you feel in yourself that you don't really enjoy playing with stacks decks, then that's something that you can tell the other players. You can use constructive feedback to say, hey, you know what? Let's play another type of game this time. Can we not use stacks this time, and you can use stacks next time? So it's about maintaining communication, and that's the communication. That's part of SEL. So I'll discuss that. I'll cover that in a while. Okay, so social awareness is the next core competency. Social awareness is defined as the abilities to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. So this involves identifying social cues to determine how others feel, taking another person's perspective. You demonstrate empathy and compassion. You show concern for the feelings of others. You understand and express gratitude. You recognize strengths in others. You identify diverse social norms, including the unjust ones. Recognizing situational demands and opportunities. Um, if you are the one using the stacks deck and you feel that some players do not enjoy playing with you, so part of the things that we want to teach the children are you identify social cues. So if you use the stacks deck, but others don't like playing with stacks because their decks you don't have decks that play very fun and well with stacks, then maybe you can adjust, you know, because you take the other person's perspective. So this is the other way around. So if you're given a constructive feedback by the other person, so you take it, you understand, and then you express gratitude. Okay, so this is an example. You were invited by a friend in an EDH game, and you don't know what power levels their EDH decks are. So you brought a couple of EDH decks, and they play a casual battle cruiser power level type of deck. You bring up the deck that matches their type of game. From their perspective, you understand that if you play a CDH deck on a pod that displays battle cruiser decks, it's not fun for everyone. You know, so they're starting to play top lands, two mana rocks, but you start playing all your moxes and combo on game round one or round two. It's not fun for everyone. So there are certain contexts that you may want to. You have to be socially aware, basically, of the people around you, and being able to adjust to it. So that's something that we want to address. You know, another example. You start a game with an opponent and you notice that he's very grumpy. You ask why. He tells you that he always loses to a particular deck. Maybe he loses to a red deck wins deck. However, he gets matched to you, and you're playing a red wins deck. So you talk to this player maybe after the game and explain why his deck is a bad matchup for your deck. And then maybe you can teach the player particular sideboarding strategy that he could use. So this is about being able to converse and engage with a person because you identify social cues. You know that he's very upset, that you don't want to leave it as is, that he's very upset about it, and you care about the person. Some exercises that you can teach with your students. Um, Teach them to express gratitude. Say thank you or congratulations or good luck on your next game. So make it a habit to practice that with all your children or your students. You know, at this point, I'd like to discuss that, sometimes jokes or playmats or sleep arts may not be appropriate for all play groups. Sometimes in your private group of friends, in your own group of friends, maybe you're using a particular playmat with, skimpy outfits or certain arts that may be fun to you. But if you bring it to a different play group, please understand and be socially aware that not everyone appreciates uh, certain art. You have to be very sensitive about this kind of things, including jokes. Sometimes we may see players or children or students telling inside jokes to each other, but given a particular social context, if they utter that joke to another person, which it's not really part of their group, that joke may be offensive. So this is something we want to teach uh, players, we teach students that we always need to be socially aware of what we bring to the table, whether it's a playmat or a T-shirt with certain arts. Let's be sensitive about what's displayed. Okay. So the other thing, communicate relationship skills. Relationship skills is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. So this is about communicating clearly, collaborating with others, and looking to resolve conflicts as they arise. Um, Magic the Gathering is the perfect medium for this. Magic the Gathering is a game of communication. You have to, this is even part of our MTR. You have to maintain effective communication with your opponent. Right? So relationship skills include initiating contact with others and cultivating friendship, sharing one's thoughts and feelings, communicating effectively, demonstrating cultural humility, practicing teamwork, resolving conflicts constructively, resisting negative social pressure, resisting stereotypes, showing leadership in groups. So these are things that can be taught by playing Magic the Gathering. Let me give you an example. A player notices two other players arguing about certain rules interaction of certain cards. She listens closely to both players and talks to both players about finding a proper solution. She actively looks for resources online or calls another friend who knows about magic rules and resolves the argument. So this is what we want to encourage players to do. If they find people, other players who are arguing about rules, and magic rules can be quite confusing to, especially to new players. If they find other players arguing about rules, and they know that they can help, they don't know exactly how to resolve the rules question, but they know somebody who knows. Um, Please encourage them to offer help. You know, communicate to both players, collaborate with them, and look to resolve conflicts as they arise. Now, the other example, um, the opponent at the end of the active player's turn asks the active player if he drew extra cards. The opponent suspected that the active player may have drawn extra cards during his turn. The active player offered to have cards in his graveyard counted, including the cards in his hand and the cards in play. He did not react negatively to the accusation, but instead aimed to resolve the issue by following the correct process. So sometimes, when confronted by an accusation, players tend to react negatively. We want to teach our students that, if you are being confronted or you're being accused, offer to resolve it. You offer, if you suspect that I drew extra cards, let's count. Offer to count the graveyard, the hand, the play, and maybe reach out to a judge to help with that process. But the whole goal here is being able to communicate clearly instead of begrudging the accusatory tone of the other player. You know? So communicating clearly, collaborating with others, and looking to resolve conflicts, these are very important. No? Ultimately, social awareness and relationship skills are linked. So if self-awareness and self-management are linked, social awareness and relationship skills are also linked. For example, when students attempt to resolve a conflict between themselves, those are relationship skills. The process is made easier when both of them empathize with each other, and that is social awareness. Okay, so when they are trying to resolve conflict and both of them practice empathy, it's a lot easier. Everything's a lot easier. Um, Examples, no exercises that you can do with your students. We encourage players to communicate effectively, even if it's just a casual game. You encourage players to ask questions. For example, in in-game interactions, you greet players by name at the beginning of the game. So these are things that you can establish in your play group or in your club that players should do every time there's a game. Lastly, and this is the fifth competency, responsible decision making. We're constantly placed in situations where in our lives, it's very important to know how to react according to context. So responsible decision making is defined as the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. You know, um, skills involved in ethical and responsible decision making. It includes demonstrating curiosity and open-mindedness, learning how to make reasoned judgment after analyzing information, data, and facts. Recognizes one's responsibility to behave ethically, anticipating and evaluating consequences of one's actions, recognizing how critical thinking skills are used both inside and outside of the school. Okay. Now, the concept of ethical decision making and responsibility is closely tied to the other components that we've just discussed. For example, I'll give you an example. To do the right thing by standing up to friends who are mistreating others, a student needs to be in touch with their own values. So that's self awareness. Be able to regulate conflicting emotions. That's self management. They also need to be able to empathize with those who are affected. That's social awareness. And resist peer pressure to join in. That's relationship skills. Okay, some example. A student witnesses some of his peers teasing a new player who recently arrived from a different place. They mock his accent and make fun of his deck. Now, the student who sees this feels uncomfortable, but everyone else seems to be laughing along. He worries that if he intervenes, he will become a target himself. Now, what would be the responsible decision making event that he needs to do here? So the conflict is if he intervenes, he might get targeted na. Simple as that. But if he doesn't intervene, it's not gonna be resolved. No? The issue's gonna be may become worse. So as a responsible person, you know that you can do something about it. So regardless whether there's a risk for him to be targeted by the maybe bullies of the group, that player would still talk to the group, overcome their fear, and talk to the group and say, "Hey, you know what? I think what you're doing is not right," and encourage them to play a casual game and have fun. You know, so there are many instances where um, sometimes players notices injustices or things that are happening negatively around them, and they choose to ignore. So we want to teach our students that if they notice that there's a need for them to intervene, and it's within their power and capability to do something about it, they need to act. They can act. And we teach them how to act properly, you know, how to approach this properly. Some exercises that you can do with your students. You can allow them to organize a tournament themselves. Maybe they dictate what format, whether it's proper, tribal, anything goes. They can do rule zero, custom rules. You know? So these are you allowing the group to make decisions for themselves and be able to identify the repercussions or the consequences of their decision. So you can modify the game, for example, every time you mulligan, you tell a joke to the group. So that's one consequence of mulligan. You know, these are things that you can add on to the game just to encourage additional interaction among players. Okay, just to recap, um, the social emotional learning is a process. So this is not taught in one sitting. It has to undergo a process through which children and adults identify and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Children should be provided with opportunities where they are exposed to these situations that proper behavior can be taught. So our goal is we want to establish a play group or a club. We want that group to be a safe environment for children to learn how to play Magic the Gathering. And you as judges, you as mentors, your job is to observe them. So you observe the players, the children play, and then we we talk to them whenever they encounter difficulties or when they encounter challenges that is related to the core competencies of SEL. So if one player is very shy, we talk to them. If one player is loses their temper um, very easily, so it's a safe space for them to express those kinds of emotions. But it's our job to provide them that space and teach them how to manage those emotions. That's why I think Magic the Gathering is a very important tool where we can encourage children to play the game, but by playing the game, we teach them SEL. Um, I'd like to show you next one initiative that's being done in the US. This is called Magic Kids. This is a charitable organization in the US right now. So you can go to this website, magickids.org, and they're partnered with Judge Academy. They promote Magic the Gathering as a learning tool for children. So it uses unused, donated magic cards to teach children the basics of MTG. So if you go to and log into Judge Academy under the skill tree, you would find under the tab partnership education, you'd see a very new entry there called Magic Kids by Weird Cards. So there's currently three courses available. So far, you can go through the text. So you can go through the text and the video. Um, I went through those, but I don't think the questions, the quizzes are available yet. But you can already peruse the sections and learn. This is a very good tool and very nice concept developed by Magic Kids. So what they do, if I just go back, they said that obviously before you can teach SEL to students, they have to learn how to play Magic the Gathering and actually have magic cards, right? So if you have access to your local play groups or LGS, then they have excess cards that they don't use, maybe offer cards, common cards, or bulk rares. You can give them to children and have them go through it. So Magic Kids, they do the thing called build, sort, and play. So it basically teaches them uh, how to sort cards, how to build decks, and how the basics of play. Um, A. Um, they also recommend that you find a good location, you identify an anchor staff at that location, and have an audience in mind. I'd like to tie all of this together to my final point. What are the challenges and opportunities that we have? Okay. So we said that we wanted to build a game club. So the first question is, how do I approach my LGS to start a play group for kids? Okay. So if you are judging in a local play group and you want to create a kids club to teach Magic the Gathering and thereby encourage social and emotional learning, and observe these kids play Magic the Gathering, maybe you can talk to the store owner and say, hey, I wanted to establish a club, but this is exclusively for kids, or maybe those who wanted to join, because I wanted to impart social and emotional learning, as well as teach them how to play. Maybe you can have an arrangement with the LGS and determine the time and day where the kids can come in and play, and that will be the safe space for them. Um, it's the same thing with schools. Um, I'd like to I'd like to give an example because some schools are not really very open to a gaming club concept. So some schools may have gaming clubs, but not schools have an existing gaming club. But if you do have schools, or maybe your previous schools, access or contact to those schools, maybe you can talk to the principal or the school administrator and say, hey, you know what? I'd like to help your students. Maybe we can build a gaming club for the kids, for the students. It could be an extracurricular activity for them. I'd like to bring along Magic the Gathering, and then I'd like to teach them how to play Magic the Gathering. And then the school would say, uh, "What's the value that you bring if we build this club? What does it bring to the school? What's in it for the school?" So we justify it by saying we'd like to complement the whatever the children are doing with the school by allowing us to teach social and emotional learning through games. Now, it doesn't have to be exclusively Magic the Gathering. So Magic the Gathering can just be one of the other games actually. So it could be both tabletop or it could be esports or electronic games. If they have an esports club already, so it's really more about uh, getting the buy-in of the stakeholders, so parents, teachers, school administrators, to see that gaming in general is that bad. So there's so many things that are misconceptions about gaming, including Magic the Gathering. And this is something that we wanted to correct. And the very first thing that we wanted to correct is that gaming is not really bad. It offers you an opportunity to, in our topic right now, teach social emotional learning. But it also allows us to teach responsible gaming to kids, It's not saying that if I teach them Magic the Gathering, they'll be playing Magic the Gathering the whole day. Part of the responsible decision making process that we teach kids is that we want to play Magic the Gathering responsibly. You don't spend all your lunch money, you don't eat and spend all your lunch money to buy Magic the Gathering cards. That's something that we do not want to encourage because they have very limited resources. So instead of encouraging to buy expensive cards right away, we let them use free donated Magic cards and just use these cards as a medium to teach them how to play Magic the Gathering. Now, eventually, when they get out of the club and they have their own money, because we taught them how to act responsibly, they now have the option. I have this last money of mine. Do I use it to go to my savings, or do I buy Magic the Gathering cards? So we want these students to be more responsible. It's part of the five core competency. Um, do we let students play 8 hours a day? Of course not. We want them to be very aware of their time management. We want them to be very aware of their nutrition. We want them to take a bath, and be more socially aware that you don't go to a play group that you stink. It's parts. So these are things that we can correct very early on and impart to students that when you go out and play with people, you have to be presentable. You know, so this addresses most of our concerns also because we encounter a lot of these individuals who would lose tempers, individuals who will not take a bath, but play in the LGS. These are teaching moments for us. We want these kids to learn how to be self-aware, manage themselves, be socially aware. You know, and be responsible. Um, and okay, to the other questions, where do I find resource persons to help moderate a club or play group? So it could be you, it could be somebody from the school, and we teach that somebody. So it's like we find a volunteer teacher who is very willing to moderate a club. We teach them how to play Magic the Gathering, or you volunteer your time. Or if it's an LGS, we find other players who would like to take on this volunteer work. Where do I find resources to allow more players play Magic the Gathering? So that's within the LGS. So it's also encouraging the LGS to adopt more players in their area and make it very positive that playing is a lot more than just winning games. Playing games is a way to learn social and emotional learning. Um, so that's the end of my presentation. Can says, as an added note about challenges, if you are in a public area, make sure the store location yourself is insured and prepare to secure children from adults. That's very correct. It goes from random bullying, intimidation, all the way to pedophilia. That's why that's why when we build this group, whether it's a club in the school or it's a club inside an LGS, we want this to be a safe space for children. It needs a moderator, it needs somebody to be watching out for kids, because every game that they play is a teachable moment for you. Um, Personally, I like, okay, so thank you. So it means Chris parents going after you because they are trusting with their child. That's what we want to establish. We want to establish the trust of parents, teachers, school administrators that games are not evil. That's the main takeaway here. Games, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's analog or digital, games are not necessarily bad. You know, anything bad associated with gaming is preventable through education, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to educate because we want these kids to develop their social and emotional intelligence. So, if you have any other questions, I'm taking feedback and questions right now.